Welcome to this September 30th Eclipse OpenJ9 community call. As always, please add your name and affiliation to the list of attendees, just so we know who's been attending the call, and particularly if you've been regularly attending, just so we can keep track of that information. And I will update it myself as well. And then we'll pause here for a minute to give people an opportunity to bring up anything they would like added to the agenda. Or any community concerns that they want to bring forth. So last week we had a lightning talk from Teresa on sealed classes, and we tentatively have one on hidden classes lined up for next week from Hung. So looking forward to having that for next week. I do see that someone has added in an OpenJDK method handles or JSR 292 talk, potentially for mid-November. Babneet, I'm assuming you've added this?
Yep, that was me.
Yeah, that sounds great, and particularly as we get closer, we can figure out the exact week that you'd be available to give that talk.
Yep.
Are there any other potential talks people want to propose? Okay. Then we'll take a look at the new user-raised issues, just to make sure that particularly user issues are getting addressed and that our community is engaging with the broader group. So I see an issue with JCommand that was raised. Looks like there's a discussion already happening there. Looks like this is being taken care of, thanks to everyone who's jumped in on that. The second issue here is a crash when there's a different JDK on the path. This is interesting. I'll have to dig into this. Has anybody started looking at this already? I think this is an important one for us to figure out what's going on here and make sure that we get that resolved. Follow up after the meeting with Toby and Pete and see if we can get something lined up for that. And the other issues here have been from previous community calls. Are there any that people want to call out as needing more attention at this point? Okay. And I will close that and we'll jump back to the agenda. I won't open the next two links, but just the reminder that we do want to make sure that the project is very open. And so tagging issues as help wanted or beginner as easy onboards into the project is a good idea. And then please try and leave those issues where possible for new people to come in and join the project. So I know for a lot of these, seasoned contributors can often clean them up fairly quickly, but in some ways it's better to leave them to be onboarding and on-ramps for new contributors. So please do be aware of that. And then we'll take a look at our dashboard trends. I'm getting some background noise, so if you're not speaking, can you mute? So we'll take a look at the OpenJ9 trends. Continuing to see some growth. We have not seen a huge uptick related to JDK 15. But we haven't been out there very long on 15 yet. So it would be just out of curiosity to take a look at this versus hotspot for 15. Yeah, the download trends aren't enormous for 15 in the first place. Are there other trends that people want to look at or trends that we need to discuss today? All right. Then we will jump into the usual part of the agenda and start with a call out around the 0.22 release of Java 15. Thank you to everybody who was involved in that and with getting the builds put up at Adopt OpenJDK. It's great to have that release completed. I know we were a little late with that due to tracking down a particular defect that we wanted to ensure was not stop ship, but thank you to everyone who put work into solving that and into the release in general to get it out the door. We have the 0.23 release now, of course, coming up in October, so a short time frame there. Last week when we talked about this, we had been waiting for the 0.22 release builds to complete before starting the M1 builds. Have those builds been kicked off?
The Milestone 1 builds were done last week.
Done. Which puts us very close now to the tentative date for the M2 builds on October 4th, which really gives us sort of 2 days in here. So I'll open up the milestone plan and we can see what remains here. There's still 13 items that are open in this milestone. And it's unlikely that we're going to close out all 13 of these in the next couple of days. So I would strongly encourage anyone who owns an issue in this to put in the case around whether it is a stop ship issue or not, and what we need to do to determine whether it is stop ship or how we can address this for this release. So it would be good to get those cases put into the issues by probably by the end of today, if at all possible, so we have some time to react before proposed M2 date of October 4th. To that, start, stop, ship cases to the remaining. And I will announce that on Slack as well. And just a reminder for anybody who is working on one of those issues and has a patch ready soon, that those patches will need to be double delivered, as of course we have already code split. Is there any other discussion on the 0.23 release? All right, then the next item on this is around the JIT server deployments in Kubernetes. We've had a couple of issues raised recently around how to demonstrate how to do deployments on Kubernetes, in particular with Helm charts and operators. And so I've linked to the issue and the 2 pull requests where the discussions have been occurring. And Raghu has offered to join the call today to talk a little bit more about those deployments and sort of the intention and desires behind these pieces of work, so that everybody in the community has a strong understanding of this as we're reviewing the code and the direction that this work is going, to make sure that it's the direction that works for this project and is something that we can support. So Raghu, are you on the call?
I am. Thank you, Dan.
I'll turn things over to you then.
Awesome. I don't have slides for today, but I did speak to some of you and try to understand, and also been watching the comments and other things that are going on in the issue. The background for this is there are two PRs open by Chris. One that has runtime component operators. The other one is that has just the Helm chart. So the idea is to just go with the Helm chart, a simpler version of the Helm chart, so the maintenance and everything will be easier, and we will add new features one by one. I know, and there are already questions are on the Helm chart. When the Helm chart was opened by Chris, we wanted to do some reviews before it kind of goes. The PR is open, see if all things are in place, but that couldn't be done. So what we're going to do is going to patch it with the right things, and there were license questions as well. So we have made some updates to kind of patch it up as well. So this is where things are right now, and there are some questions, and I'm trying to give some background and the actual intention of putting these Helm charts in, and answer some of the concerns and questions that are already there, and also answer them in the issue, of course. And then maybe if you have any more, I will try to answer them. So the background for this is we have the JIT server. Marius is on the call as well today. What we're trying to do is make the deployment of JIT server easy and use of JIT server easy. That's the primary goal of this work. To do that, we actually had prepared a Helm chart. Helm chart is basically just a deployment definition, how to deploy things. What it does is, I think I will start sharing some things to give you background. But before I get to that, I'll explain the way things changed a little bit, so you get an idea how we got to where we are. So we prepared the Helm chart, and then when we wanted to sort of open a PR and propose a design and reason why we are doing this, I think the issue is 9443, where we opened an issue and then a PR. And when we opened the issue, what we realized is there may be already existing operators that had just been, I think, in January, been created by one of the open source projects that is related to IBM, but the project is open source. And there was an active community that was actually maintaining it. It was the AppStudy team. They developed something called the runtime component operator, basically a common operator thing that others could use to deploy their runtimes or runtime related applications or services. We tried to make use of that, but what happened is I am not quite sure if it was as big at the beginning or it kind of grew to that size after. But at the time, around a couple of months ago, when we were at the stage of opening the PR, the whole code base was humongous. I think it's so big that it kind of we had to ask question, and I think it was rightly asked when the PR was opened, why is this so big, and is there value to that kind of a code, and can we really maintain it? So looking back, what we thought is the idea to use runtime component operator was because it is going to offer some features that are already there, such as Knative support. Knative is the serverless scaling down to zero kind of support, and also some other support such as the day 2, which is upgrading the existing services when the JDK version changes and such things. But looking back, what happened was the size is so big and the maintenance would be probably harder, and there is more work needed to actually properly integrating it. And that basically means that rebasing and other things would be harder as well, and the core size is huge. So then after the review, I spoke to Chris as well, who is working on it. What we thought was it is much better to go with the simple Helm chart, then add features just as we had planned before. That will make the maintenance and everything easy for us. So that's where we are at, and we're going to patch the Helm chart with some of the changes asked and discussed in the PR. Now, coming back to the reason why we need a Helm chart, I think I have kind of described this a couple of times, call here, but some clarification is needed, I realize. So one of the things is, I think I'll try to share the screen and see if I can go to the diagrams I had in the issue to just give a background. Share the screen. This will place Dan hiding a screen share. Replace. So I'm going ahead. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good enough, I guess. Yeah. Maybe if you can click on it and enlarge it, that's good enough. You know. Yeah, awesome. So the blue thing that you see is the Kubernetes cluster or OpenShift cluster, any other cluster. The reason we're trying to do this is if right now, if anybody wants to use Git server in a Kubernetes-based environment, which is sort of a lot of enterprises have moved on to already, are moving to, either on their own or on somebody else's cloud. The easiest thing to do would be to give them a way so that they can run a couple of commands and be able to use the Git server. So this is the primary reason why we're trying to do Helm chart. Helm chart is a slightly older way of deploying things, as in the operators are the latest, but operators are sort of more specific to Red Hat OpenShift, although there is an operator concept in Kubernetes as well, but not getting into the details of it. But Helm is sort of common across. Helm can be used in any Kubernetes cluster, can be used in OpenShift, so it's sort of a common way of deploying. And there are Helm repositories. So when somebody wants to deploy an application that is free or open or anything, what people do is they go to a Helm repo, which is a Git repo. A bunch of folders are there, and when they, I think I can show an example here. I think I need to share my screen. I will continue to try and do that. Let's see what happens. Application window, Chrome. Yeah, let me share. Yeah, I think it's the Bitcoin chart. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So this is the way the Helm chart is structured is it's basically a folder where a bunch of YAML files define how what is the container we're deploying. It itself does not have anything. It doesn't store any dependencies. Just pulls the container. In this case, the adopt OpenJDK container that we have in the official repos, and deploys it on the Kubernetes cluster on the server, which runs as a service. The documentation, everything are part of the Helm chart. And usually how it works is we don't have that part yet because once our thing is in our repo, OpenJN repo, we need to sort of submit this to, for example, say Red Hat repository and other people where they store all the charts. So when we submit that, what people can just do is they say repo add on their terminal. They just say repo add, and they connect to the repo, and then you just say Helm install, like this. If you can see that basically pulls down the container and installs the service or application, depending on what they're trying to use. Again here, whether Helm chart deploys a service or application, is there a best practice? The best practice is Helm chart deploys software, and whether it should run as an application either as a service is up to the application configuration. The way application is configured, it runs. Although that can be sort of managed through this, but it is quite up to the application to do it. Anyway, coming back, the Helm install. So people that are using it have all the documentation, everything in one place, and anything that they need to do along with it. For example, if for Git server, I'll show. I think let me see if I have our sample chart here. So what we doing here is getting started with OpenJ9 Git server technology. So in the Helm chart itself, we have a simple explanation how to use the application, because customers usually have an application already running, and we need to add Git server to it. So what do they do? To do that, first they need to install the Git server, because to be able to use Git server, they need to install Git server, and they do that by doing a Helm install. This is in the works document you are seeing. It's not the final copy. This is the patch we are trying to update because of the license thing. We did is we generated the template that we use from scratch, which is generated by the Helm tool. So it is a fresh code. I will share the detail in the issue, but so this is the in progress piece. That's why you see example or whatnot. The Helm install is what they need to do, and that will actually give them the JIT server. It'll get the JIT server running on a particular port. They can change the port or whatnot, and there will be documentation as to how to change them, whatnot. And then the next step is all they need to do is, depending on what the customer application setting is, they need to update this environment variable in their setup. Now, there are so many variations on how this can be done, and this is very specific to how customers' applications, enterprise applications are running. An example, I think, if I go back to this one, is if they are using Helm chart, for example, if it's an Open Liberty and they had used Open Liberty Helm chart to deploy their application, all they need to do is they do need to do an Helm upgrade like this, as you see in the second step here. We will be updating the document to provide this information. Of course, we had this, not in the patch that you saw, but we will be adding this there. All they need to do is do an Helm upgrade with the values, new YAML file, and that YAML file looks just like this. Only one line here, right here, two line actually. That's all they need to do, and we will be giving, of course, more information on what this thing in the orange means. It's the name of the JIT server endpoint. That's all they need to do. So that all will be documented as part of the just like how the best practice is, as part of the Helm charts own README doc, which usually people using Helm chart now to just go look at it, run the command, and they know that the service gets deployed, and then they follow any other instructions related to update their application. Again, there were a couple of questions about features. I think at this time we should, in the interest of all the clarity and whatnot, we should get the basic functionality in and then add features one by one. This is also because we are, I think, testing some of the scaling and other features for JIT server. So once those numbers are in, I think we can add that feature, and it'll be a little bit premature, in my opinion, to already add the scaling related features. So when that is there, we'll definitely have to update this. But until then, what I was thinking is we could just go with the functionality of being able to deploy JIT server and being able to actually update the application. We have actually tried a couple of different ways of actually, even when AppStudy was around, we have tried with using AppStudy, and there is an AppStudy replacement for it's called Odoo, or I forget what the actual name is for Red Hat. There is a Red Hat tool that's being developed in place now. It is a developer tool that helps people even avoid dealing with the applications, just run some commands and it deploys it for them, kind of, and how to use that to basically enable JIT server. We had worked that out for AppStudy. We will work that out, I think, for the new Red Hat tool as well. But once this goes forward, so there are some dependencies as well, because sooner we get this in, and of course we need to make the updates that are pending. Once we get this in, there are other steps such as being able to submit it to other repos and being able to use and then update the documentation, because depending on which repository we put this in, we need to update this documentation, or we could make our own repository in OpenJ9, and that way we can update our documentation to pick it up directly from there as well. So to be able to do that, we need to have need to know the place where this is going. That's that thing. And about being able to run multiple applications, that relates to scaling. So when we have the scaling test and numbers that we can rely on, we will update it that way. We are not ahead of the product testing itself. And we are also trying to follow the best practices, just as in how things are usually done. I think we have gone a step ahead and added some more information because JIT server is involved here. Again, the focus is on adding JIT server to technology to existing applications. But because the thing that we control is JIT server, we have to be able to deploy JIT server and then say how they can integrate their application with JIT server. That has been the focus. Marius, would you like to add anything to this one? Did I miss something? I think I'll stop sharing my screen now. And there was also a question about the versions. If you can answer also that, that would be great, I think. Marius?
Okay, I was on mute. I clicked the wrong button. Can you hear me now, right?
Yeah,
So if I have to summarize why we are doing this, I would say that the goal is to make the JIT server technology easier to be discovered and easier to be consumed. And while the idea, in an ideal situation, we have a catalog of services that you can pick from, having an OpenJ9 repo that offers a health chart is the next best thing. And it's actually possible later, if I understood correctly, to create such a catalog entry for JIT server from an existing health chart repo. I think you had a command in there. So that's my summary for why we're doing this.
And there was a question about the versions. If I understand right, the versions, the build numbers have to be the same, but there is an internal version for JIT server, right?
Yeah, I can answer that. So you don't have to write to connect a client to a server that have the exact same Java version. Every time we put a feature that makes the server incompatible with the client, we increment an internal version number. And if the two don't match, we don't allow that connection. But that happens again only sometimes when there is a new feature added or a bug fix to either the client or the server. So for most of the time, the two will be compatible, even though the build ID is different.
And how do we know the compatible versions? Because the user needs to know when they use a particular JIT server, download a particular JIT server, or they already have an application, and how do they determine which version of the JIT server?
I would say we have OpenJ9 releases, so if the user uses that, I would say stick with the same OpenJ9 release for both the client and the server. But I can give you a command to print that version out.
Yeah, I think we need to sort of document that so that there is a valid thing there.
Okay.
Of course, what we did is we picked the latest JDK version, but we need to document, I think.
At this point, because we are still fixing bugs and adding new features, if you move from one OpenJ9 version to another, let's say 0.22 to 2023, the internal version for the JIT server would have been bumped, and therefore they are not going to be compatible. But once the technology becomes more mature and the fixes become fewer, then probably we can even be compatible across releases.
Sorry, Marius, I just want to make sure I understood that, because I think I heard both. It is compatible and it isn't compatible.
No, I said it could be. It could be compatible. So as I said, every time we add a new feature, let's say we discover that we need a new front end to be redefined, and we add a new message. At that point, the client and the server become incompatible, and we bump the version number. So the question is whether or not we had to do such a fix. And right now, because the technology is still in flux and we put many fixes, it's likely that we had to do such a patch and we had to increment the version number within a month, which is our cadence for OpenJ9 release.
Usually
sorry,
practice... Yeah,
just
go ahead.
want to keep
Go ahead.
coming back to that to make sure I have that very clear here. So that means every time we do a new release, so one of the quarterly updates, the JIT server will be incompatible with
Uh,
previous
uh,
releases.
it's likely that that's going to be the case because it's likely that we'll have to fix something that required a new message which made the server and the client incompatible. Later on, let's say a year from now, when fixes will be very rare, it's possible that within a month or 2 months we'll have no such fix, and therefore you could run, let's say, with 0.26 connecting to a 0.27.
So with that, is that incompatibility both forwards and backwards incompatible?
Yes,
Or
yes, yes.
okay. So I guess that makes my next question around that moot, which was going to be around security fixes, and in particular, how do we manage a JDK that has a security fix in the client versus knowing when they need to update the server to match the same JDK level. But given we always need to do that, that's kind of moot, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for now, to say that just they need to be same as in at least the JDK version need to be same as probably the right thing to do for now. But going forward, I think we may have to in the release notes add if the build or release is JIT server breaking, it could be part of the release notes to say that this release has JIT server breaking fixes. Requiring people to upgrade their applications if they're using this version of JIT server.
Yeah. Sometimes some of the fixes do not change the compatibility issue. If the fix doesn't add a new message,
Yeah, when
they
they
have to add another if statement to protect it. Yeah. Then we don't bump that. We may bump the number from the version, but not the minor version, and then the client and the server are compatible. So, for instance, let's say that we have a release. Let's say we have the 0.23, and then we release the 0.23.1 because we have a minor fix somewhere. Uh, then 0.23 could be compatible with the 23.1.
I think this is a really valuable discussion, but we are already up over the usual half hour for this meeting. Do you think we should have a separate meeting that's specifically around this to address this, where people can attend and we can try and close out general business for this week? I'm just mindful of people's time since Shelley already had to drop and Adam had to drop as well.
Thanks, Andrew. I got kind of caught up in the discussion on this, but that's a good point. We should probably book.
If there are further questions, please ask them so I can try to answer, and maybe another call would be nice too.
Well, why don't I just volunteer to convene, like we've done for the microJIT? I will volunteer to convene a working group meeting, or we'll call it a working group or whatever we want to call it. But I'll advertise it on the general channel, and I'll reach out to you, Dan and Raghu and Marius, since you guys are sort of the key people I think we need in that discussion. But I'll advertise it more generally on the general channel. Try to have it in the next week, and anyone is welcome to attend so that we can discuss this in more detail, but so that we don't have to hijack the main meeting here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Then in that point, we will move on to the next item on our list, and we'll kind of skim through these fairly quickly. Is there anything that we should be calling out in the adopt update? I know Shelley's had to drop, but is there anything that we need to be aware of?
Shelley did leave a message in the chat where she was asking for us to do some kind of retrospective on the last release to understand the reasons for the delay and what, if anything, we can do in the future to avoid that.
Yes, thank you. I did add a section for that, and then took the JIT server notes underneath it. We will fill that in during the next meeting. If people have comments or suggestions about things that went well in the release or things that could go better in the next one, please do fill them out here ahead of time or bring them up on the next call. JIT server comments down to the JIT server section. All right. In terms of machines, Atom's had to drop as well. Just note that there are some changes coming to our Windows machines. And that new boot JDKs are coming for JDK 16. Jumping down to the any other business then. Babneet, I see you've added something here as well.
Yep, I added notes in order to test the new support for OpenJDK method handles. So I'm planning to add PR and nightly builds for the new OpenJDK method handles. And I was also planning to test the new and old implementation simultaneously until the new implementation is good and satisfactory. So I wanted to know if any other concerns were supposed to be addressed for testing the new OpenJDK method handles.
So I think getting the testing rolled out is definitely essential to make this succeed. I think the biggest concern here is around machine availability and build farm capacity. So if you can come up with a more concrete proposal on what you need to have added here and what the build schedules you would like, I think we can work through that offline with Adam and Pete, and calling out the two of them in particular as they have a fair bit of awareness on the build system and the current capacity there. So.
Yep, sounds good. I've made notes for those 2 points.
Sorry, Adam and Pete.
Pete, okay.
Yeah, and I guess if we could have an update on that next week, just so that we're all aware of any extra load that's being imposed and what we need to be mindful of, that would be great.
Any other comments around the testing of the method handle changes?
I would say, if we're just one comment, if we're trying to reduce the load, it may be possible to do it only on like one of the latest JDKs to start with. We will eventually need to test it in the LTSs, but I suspect we may have to do a phased swap where we may swap the non-LTS releases in one release and then swap the LTS releases like a release later once it's had time to soak or something to reduce the risk. So we may not need to test the LTS releases as regularly until we're live in the prime release and looking to do the backport.
Yeah, that makes sense. Starting with sort of a single platform on the release that we're working on and slowly expanding that out.
Yeah, if we're going to do limited platforms, I think it would be good to make sure we have little endian and big endian covered just in case there's any weird bit twiddling things, because some of that code is pretty intricate.
Devin, is there an update on the CMake migration?
I have the AIX PR to switch over. That default is open and waiting on review. And from the Windows side, it just looks like there's one more issue with JIT, and I have it tracked down and opening the PR sometime this afternoon. And I've started to dig in on the ZOS stuff again.
What is it that's holding up AIX?
I think no one's reviewed and merged the PR yet.
Okay.
If you can either tag people in that PR or post it into the committer's public channel and ask for a review, hopefully we can get that reviewed.
Right.
We've already discussed the Helm and operators. Is there an update on the microjit discussions?
From what I've heard, I think they're making good progress. There's just a little bit more coding that needs to happen, so they're working through that. So yeah, just usual cadence. And the next meeting will be when was the last one? 24th. So the next one will be the 8th.
Do we have Daryl on the call this week? I don't see him, so I guess we'll push the ARM32 support discussion as well. And the
Yeah,
two
if we
other
don't get
items.
progress on that soon, we may need to convene another call if Daryl can't make this time.
Yep, agreed. And then the other two items have been previously discussed. So is there anything that needs to be called out there today?
Nothing for CanOSP.
Nothing for the API doc automation.
All right, then thank you everyone for attending, and we'll have the next one of these calls October 7th. It's some good discussion today, and thank you, Andrew, for stepping up to volunteer and to convene the separate meeting there.
No problem. If people can just keep an eye on the OpenJ9 Slack, I'll be messaging the key players for availability over a couple of different days, and we'll try and pick a time and then advertise that time. Thanks.
That's good. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.